Most men aren't single by choice. They're single because love has become a threat. If you want more truths no one else will say, make sure you subscribe. Most men don't stay single because they enjoy the silence. They stay single because silence feels safer than being truly seen. There's a strange kind of comfort in not having to explain yourself, not having to open the doors you've kept locked for years, not having to let someone walk into the rooms of your past that you still avoid yourself. When you've learned to live behind emotional walls, the idea of someone stepping inside those walls feels less like companionship and more like exposure. And for many men, exposure is terrifying, not because they're weak, not because they're incapable, but because they've been conditioned for most of their lives to treat vulnerability like a threat. From childhood, they're told to toughen up, to stay strong, to keep it together. Every tear, every fear, every moment of softness gets tucked away, slowly forming an internal script that says, if they see the real you, they'll leave. So they hide, not intentionally, not maliciously, but instinctively, like it's the safest thing they can do. When a man has spent years surviving behind emotional armor, intimacy doesn't feel comforting, it feels dangerous. The possibility of being misunderstood, judged, or rejected hits deeper than they're willing to admit. And this is where the real problem begins. Because the moment someone tries to get closer, the moment a woman asks what's wrong or tries to understand him, a panic rises inside him. Not the kind that makes him run, but the kind that makes him shut down. The kind that whispers, don't let her in. She won't understand. She'll walk away if she sees the cracks. So he keeps the distance. Just enough to be present, not enough to be known. Just enough to connect, not enough to unravel. It's not that he refuses love, it's that he doesn't trust what love might reveal. And on the outside, it looks like he's cold, guarded, uninterested. But inside, it's something much darker. Most men carry shame they never speak of, memories they never processed, failures they still don't forgive themselves for. They bury all of it under work, distraction, or silence, hoping no one notices the weight they drag behind them. But love has a way of dusting off the things they try to bury. And that's why so many men pull away when relationships get serious. Not because they don't care, but because someone caring forces them to face the parts of themselves they've spent years avoiding. It's easier to stay single than to be seen, easier to pretend they don't need anyone than to risk someone discovering the parts they keep in the dark. Even loneliness feels more manageable than the fear of being revealed. And this is the truth nobody wants to admit. Many men aren't protecting themselves from heartbreak. They're protecting others from their own hidden chaos. They believe no one would stay if they saw it. They believe their wounds make them unlovable. So they stay alone, not because they want to, but because it feels safer than the alternative. And the tragedy is that they'll never say this out loud. They'll just call it independence or not ready, or focusing on themselves, when in reality, it's something far more fragile. It's the quiet fear that if someone ever looked too closely, they'd see the truth he's been running from. He's not as put together as he looks. He's hurting in ways he doesn't know how to explain. And he's terrified that someone he cares about might see it, because deep down, he believes that being seen is the first step to being abandoned. The danger lives in being known. Most people assume men stay single because they want freedom, space, independence, the ability to move without explaining themselves. But the truth is far darker and far quieter than that. Men stay single because emotional responsibility feels heavier than loneliness. The world expects them to carry their own weight, but relationships often demand carrying someone else's too. And when a man already feels like he's barely holding himself together, the idea of being someone's emotional anchor feels overwhelming. It's not that he doesn't want connection, it's that connection comes with expectations he fears he can't meet. When a woman says she needs reassurance, openness, presence, understanding, he hears something different. He hears be perfect, never falter, never break. And he knows he can't live up to that. So he chooses the one place where he won't disappoint anyone, solitude. Loneliness is familiar, predictable, quiet. It drains him, yes, but it doesn't pressure him. It doesn't ask him to explain what he's feeling when he barely understands it himself. It doesn't demand emotional fluency he was never taught. Most men grew up without the language for their inner world. They were told to be strong, to move on, to toughen up, to push through. No one taught them how to hold someone else's fears when they can't even hold their own. And when a man feels unequipped, he withdraws. Not to hurt anyone, but because he fears being the cause of someone else's hurt. There's a quiet panic that rises in him when emotional needs surface. Not because he doesn't care, but because he cares too much and feels too little control. He worries that when she asks for more of him, she's unknowingly asking him to expose the part he hides from everyone, the part that struggles, the part that doubts, the part that breaks. And instead of risking being seen as inadequate, he steps back. He chooses the role he knows he can fulfill, being alone. People misinterpret this as disinterest, coldness, or immaturity, but often it's none of those things. It's fear, a deep, raw fear of failing emotionally the way he feels he has failed in other areas of his life. A man who doesn't believe he's enough won't try to be someone's everything, so he quietly avoids the situations that require emotional consistency. He tells himself he's not ready, or he's focused on goals, or he just hasn't met the right person. But beneath all of those excuses lies the same truth. Emotional responsibility terrifies him more than loneliness ever could. He doesn't want to be the man who forgets to check in, who doesn't know how to respond to tears, who freezes when someone needs comfort. He doesn't want to disappoint the one person he might actually care about. And to him, disappointing someone you love feels like a deeper failure than being alone. So he chooses the simpler pain, the pain he can control, the pain that only damages him. He thinks he's doing the right thing by stepping back. He thinks he's protecting others from the version of himself he fears isn't enough. And he doesn't realize that this self-protection is slowly turning into self-abandonment. He gives up on being loved before anyone has the chance to love him. He convinces himself he's fine alone because the alternative feels too heavy, too demanding, too risky. He's not avoiding relationships. He's avoiding the possibility of being the reason someone cries, the reason someone feels unsupported, the reason someone feels alone while standing right next to him. He would rather suffer in solitude than fail in connection. Loneliness hurts less than disappointing someone. Most men who stay single for years aren't choosing freedom. They're choosing familiarity. And the most familiar thing in their lives isn't independence or peace or clarity. It's the old wounds they've been carrying for so long that they've forgotten what it feels like to live without them. These wounds sit quietly in the background, shaping everything: how much they trust, how deeply they attach, how quickly they pull away. They don't talk about them because they don't know how to. They don't heal them because healing means reopening what they've spent years burying. So they keep moving forward with emotional injuries that never stop bleeding. A lot of men had childhoods that taught them to survive, not to feel. They grew up being told to toughen up, to stop crying, to move on. Maybe they had a distant mother, an unpredictable father, or a home where emotions weren't discussed, only endured. Maybe they watched love fall apart in front of them. Maybe they were betrayed young. Maybe their first real heartbreak shattered them in ways they still haven't recovered from. These moments leave marks. Not the kind you see, but the kind that shape how they show up in every relationship afterward. And instead of dealing with those wounds, they learn to avoid anything that might bring them back to the surface. They pretend they're fine. They laugh it off. They throw themselves into work. They distract themselves with routine. They tell themselves they're not ready for a relationship, when the truth is far more painful. They don't feel whole enough to be loved. Love asks them to be open. Wounds make them stay closed. Love asks them to trust. Wounds make them suspicious. Love asks them to let someone in. Wounds remind them what happened the last time they did. So they retreat, not because they don't want connection, but because connection threatens to expose the parts of themselves they've learned to silence. Someone asking, "Are you okay?" feels dangerous. Someone saying, "I care about you," feels unreal. Someone wanting their heart feels like a risk they aren't sure they'll survive if it goes wrong again. They're not afraid of love. They're afraid of their own unhealed pain waking up. Many men don't realize how much their past controls them. They think they're choosing standards or protecting their peace or focusing on themselves. But in reality, they are protecting old scars that never fully closed. They're avoiding reminders of the moments they broke, the moments they were abandoned, the moments they weren't enough. Staying single becomes a quiet form of self-preservation, a way to keep the wounds untouched, a way to never feel that kind of pain again. But the tragedy is that pain doesn't disappear just because you avoid love. It sits inside you, shaping your beliefs about yourself, whispering that you're too damaged, too complicated, too broken to be understood. The longer those wounds stay unaddressed, the stronger they grow. And soon, a man isn't staying single because he wants to. He's staying single because he cannot imagine a version of himself that someone would stay for. He convinces himself he's better off alone, not because he is, but because the idea of healing feels harder than loneliness. These men look calm on the outside, but inside, they carry a silent storm. They've adapted so well to living with their pain that they no longer notice how much it controls them. They don't realize that staying single isn't a lifestyle choice. It's a survival strategy, one that keeps them safe, but also keeps them stuck. And until they face the wounds they've buried, they'll continue choosing distance over connection, silence over vulnerability, and solitude over love. Because for them, the past never really ended. Old wounds still rule the heart. Men don't stay single because they don't want love. They stay single because somewhere along the way, love stopped feeling like warmth and started feeling like a trap. The more a man experiences life, the more he sees how fragile trust is, how easily loyalty fractures, how quickly connection can turn into disappointment. After enough hurt, love no longer looks like a place to rest. It looks like a place to lose control. And control is the one thing a wounded man refuses to give up again. He's not afraid of commitment. Commitment is simple. It's the aftermath he fears. He fears the slow unraveling, the change in tone, the forgotten kindness, the shifting energy that tells him he's no longer wanted. He fears the moment affection turns into accusation, when he becomes the villain in a story he never meant to write. He fears the tears, the distance, the cold silence that always seems to come when a woman stops seeing him as the man she hoped he'd be. And above all, he fears that every time he gives his heart, he's handing someone the power to break him in ways he may not recover from again. A lot of men have learned the hard way that love is not always safe. Maybe they were cheated on. Maybe they were left without explanation. Maybe they gave everything and were met with betrayal so deep it carved permanent distrust into their bones. One heartbreak can change a man's entire understanding of relationships. It turns hope into caution. It turns passion into calculation. It turns vulnerability into armor. Suddenly, every new connection feels like a test he already knows he'll fail, or worse, one he might pass only to lose in the end. He remembers the nights he stayed up wondering what went wrong. He remembers the confusion of being replaced. He remembers the pain of being forgotten by someone he once believed would never leave. These memories don't just fade, they reshape him. They make him sharper, colder, more aware. Not because he wants to be this way, but because he refuses to let anyone pull him into that kind of darkness again. So he builds a life where he depends on no one. He convinces himself he prefers the quiet. He tells himself love is overrated. He calls himself independent, but what he really is guarded, deeply guarded. He has learned to analyze every word, every shift in tone, every pause in conversation. He watches for signs of change long before anything actually changes. He anticipates the ending before the beginning even has a chance. To many women, this looks like emotional distance. It looks like commitment issues, but that's not the truth. The truth is, he's terrified of giving his heart to someone who might walk away the moment he finally feels safe. He fears the emotional collapse more than the loneliness. He fears the loss more than the lack of love. Loneliness is predictable. Love is not, and unpredictability feels dangerous. So he stays single, not because he doesn't want someone, but because he no longer trusts the fragile nature of human connection. He doesn't trust promises. He doesn't trust closeness. He doesn't trust the idea that someone could choose him today and still choose him tomorrow. His heart has learned to prepare for the worst, even while secretly longing for the best. And that's the tragedy. He desires love, but he doesn't trust it. He wants connection, but he fears the cost. So he keeps his distance, hoping safety will replace the emptiness. But it never does. It only deepens it. Because deep down, he knows the real truth. Love feels like a trap when trust is dead. In the end, men don't stay single because they don't care. They stay single because somewhere along the way, love stopped feeling like a home and started feeling like a battlefield. And when every past wound still bleeds in silence, walking alone feels safer than risking another war. But the truth is brutal. You can outrun people, but you can't outrun yourself. And the longer you hide from love, the deeper the loneliness claws into you. The heart breaks hardest when no one is there to hear it.